In storytelling, the journeys that characters go on, seeing how they change and evolve, how they react to the world and the world reacts to them, as well as how they influence and change those around them, makes for some of the most compelling parts of the story. These character arcs are often cited as some of the best and most memorable parts of a work of fiction. Some of the most well-known examples of this include things like Zuko's character arc in Avatar: The Last Airbender, Edmund Pevensey in The Chronicles of Narnia, and Donna Noble in Doctor Who. She's the best companion, don't fight me on this. We get incredibly invested in characters and story, and this is often what will drive us to keep consuming a piece of media even if everything else about it is bad. I and people I know have continued watching a show or reading a book series or watching a film series just because we like the characters, even if the plot has gone off the rails, to be kind. It is the character dynamics and their development that can keep people invested long after everything else in the show has fallen by the wayside. This is why shows like Community and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia work. A lot of these sitcoms are based entirely on the fact that it's the characters that you are there for. The reason that you watch shows like Friends isn't because you want to see how they deal with the end of the world, but because you want to see how their dynamics are going to be played in a different way and evolve in this latest episode. The importance of good storytelling through character is vital when playing TTRPG. Now, D&D is going to be my main touchstone for this because it's the system I have the most experience with, but I don't believe there will be anything in this discussion that should limit it from any other system, or indeed just storytelling in general. The core of this will be how you, as a GM, can create personalized character arcs for your PCs in a situation where you don't have full control of the narrative. We're going to examine characters like Zuko, Edmund, and Donna and see what works from their stories, what we can take, steal, and apply to RPGs, and how you can take those elements to improve your own GMing. Now, an important thing to remember is you can't just cookie cutter these elements of storytelling out of their respective mediums and expect them to work. What works in a book isn't going to always work in a film. What works in a film isn't always going to work in a game. What works in a game isn't always going to work in a book. The same is true with trying to adapt anything into TTRPG style storytelling. A failure to realise that these things need to be adapted whole hog to work in their new mediums is what leads to a lot of film adaptations of books falling short. Directors and writers of these films don't realise what only worked in a book or why it only worked in a book. And so this results in a lot of films missing the mark or just spitting on the mark and stabbing it in the back. So what stuff should we adapt? Zuko and Edmund are both characters that deal in similar themes. They both start a lot of anger, poor relationships with their family, specifically their siblings, and have a deep desire to prove themselves. This allows us to play into a key part of character arc development, which is identifying the wants and the needs of a character. Now, on the surface, these can seem like the same thing, so let me give you some examples. From the first time we meet Zuko in The Boy in the Iceberg, it's very clear to us what Zuko wants. He wants to capture the Avatar to restore his honour, gain his father's respect. This is because Zuko is still subject to the propaganda and control of the Fire Nation. He still believes that the war is their way of spreading their prosperity to the rest of the world, that the Avatar is a threat to that, and that Fire Lord Ozai is unquestionable and infallible. Because Zuko is presented as the antagonist, the audience knows from the start that this isn't true. We learn from Katara and Sokka about the devastation the Fire Nation has wrought on just the Southern Water Tribe. And in the Southern Air Temple we learn more about the Airbender genocide and the evil actions of the Fire Nation under Fire Lord Sozin, now continued under Ozai. This means it's easy for us to know that what Zuko wants is not good, and therefore what he needs is a change in perspective. To realise the lie of the Fire Nation, the evil of his father, and most importantly that the only way to regain his honour is to help the Avatar. We get to see Zuko reach this conclusion throughout the series, eventually culminating in the Day of Black Sun Part 2 when he confronts Ozai during the eclipse. But Zuko didn't come to this conclusion instantly. There is a long road that Zuko walks to reach this point, and on that road he makes mistakes, he fails, and he has to confront uncomfortable truths. Edmund Pevensey goes on a similar path to Zuko in his time in Narnia.
C.S. Lewis is liberal with his use of the narrative voice throughout the book, making it clear that Edmund is willfully spiteful to his siblings, shown by his relentless mocking of Lucy about Narnia in the early chapters, and markedly foolish, which Lewis highlights when Edmund shuts himself in the wardrobe. A lot of Edmund's issues are tied to power. He clashes with his older siblings, particularly Peter, who's taken up the role of patriarch in their father's absence, and exerts cruelty and maliciousness over the one person he does have a modicum of power over, Lucy. This is what the White Witch Jadis exploits in Edmund, and it is his pride and desire for power that brings his downfall. Edmund wants power. He wants to be king of Narnia and rule over his siblings. This potentially comes from a wider context of being a child during the Blitz. Imagine that feeling of powerlessness, watching your home slowly be destroyed and there being nothing you can do but leave. This is highlighted more in the Adam Adamson 2005 adaptation, where we clearly see Edmund's love and admiration for their father, risking his life during an air raid to secure a picture of him, and yelling at Peter over the other trying to become their dad. Their father is out fighting, making a difference, and Edmund wants to be like him but is trapped because of his age. Much like Zuko, Edmund is then faced with the realization that what he wanted isn't all it's cracked up to be. Where Zuko is given all he ever wanted only to find it feels hollow, and what it costs to get him there, it means destroying his relationship with Uncle Iroh and condemning the Earth Kingdom to Fire Nation rule, is not worth the end result. Edmund has a similar realization when, upon reaching the White Witch's castle, there is no Turkish delight. There is no throne, no kindness, only an icy cell and stale bread. He starts to become acutely aware of the cost of his actions, bearing witness to the witch turning innocent creatures to stone, that she means to kill his siblings. Both Zuko and Edmund also face a choice earlier in the story, before the lowest parts of their arc, to do the right thing. Zuko faces this choice at the end of Book 2, Earth, in the Crossroads of Destiny Part 2. He's given the choice by his sister, Azula, to either help her capture the Avatar so he can regain his honor, or remain a traitor to the Fire Nation like Iroh. Edmund faces his choice on the way to the witch's castle, either turn back and rejoin his family or press on to the castle and join Jadis. Both these are presented as moral decisions that the character intensely struggles with, which means that even when they falter, when they pick the wrong choice, we know they have it in them to make the right one, which makes the final choice, generally in the final act, that much more satisfying. The question is, how do these apply to D&D?
When crafting a story as a GM, you have to make sure that your players are at the heart of the story. To do so, get them involved, ask them questions, engage in their backstory and probe deep below the surface to get to the heart of their character and who this person is. Now, I've talked about character questionnaires a lot in previous videos, and you should definitely check them out, particularly the one that I have on Patreon. But you don't have to ask a lot of questions to be able to create a character arc. All you need to do is identify two things. What does the character want? What do they think is the answer to their problems that they need to move past whatever issue they currently have? For Zuko, this is capturing the Avatar, returning him to the Fire Nation, versus what does the character actually need to conquer their issues. This is done for Zuko when he realizes that bringing the Avatar back to the Fire Nation will restore his honor, but when he realizes that helping the Avatar, defeating the Fire Lord and returning the Four Nations to an era of peace is what will restore his honor. Once you have these two answers, you have your point A and your point B, because that's all a character arc is. It is a journey from A to B. The next question is how.
This is where Zuko and Edmund are a bit weaker as tools for creating a D&D plot. Zuko is, from the gang's perspective, an antagonist for 2.5 seasons, and Edmund spends about half the book in an antagonistic position to his siblings. It is while apart from the protagonist that these characters do their growing until they're able to take their place upon the side of the heroes. But the basic elements can still be pilfered. During the journey from A to B, Zuko and Edmund have their perspectives challenged. Zuko's worldview is challenged. The idea of how the Fire Nation is viewed throughout the Earth Kingdom is predominantly the drive for this, which we see in Zuko alone. Edmund's perspective with morality is challenged, where the cost of what he wants, to be king above Peter and his sisters thanks to Jadis, is worth the suffering it causes. We predominantly see this during his travels after joining the White Witch, especially when she turns the animals having a party to stone. It's here that I want to bring everyone's favourite Doctor Who companion, Donna Noble, into things, for she completes our triangle of perspective. Where Zuko had his worldview challenged and Edmund had his moral view challenged, Donna has her view of herself challenged. When we first meet Donna in The Runaway Bride, she has massive self-confidence and self-esteem issues that she covers up with attitude and aggression. Donna changes a fair bit between The Runaway Bride and when we next meet her in Partners in Crime, but the moment that really highlights her view of herself and how far she's come are in the 3-part finale, Turn Left, Stolen Earth, and Journey's End. Turn Left highlights the importance of Donna Noble, how her single act of kindness and compassion, her friendship with the Doctor, saved not just him, but the world in so many ways, to the point where all reality would end without her. We then get to see Donna herself take a wonderful stand for her own importance when her and the Doctor meet the Shadow Proclamation. And finally, when we reach Journey's End and the tragedy of Donna Noble comes to its culmination, the Meta-Crisis Doctor gives us some vital insight into Donna's true perception of herself. How she genuinely believes she's not important, that no one cares or listens to her. Then we reach the Dr. Donna. At long last, Donna revels in herself, her skills, her brilliance. It's no accident that the episode draws attention to something that Donna used to be constantly ashamed of, being a temp worker in Chiswick, as now being a mark of pride and skill. The triangle of perspective gives us the tools to build the journey between the want and need for a character. Think about what the character wants and needs are, and then try and figure out what part of their perspective needs to change in order for them to reach their point B, the end of their arc. Are they like Donna? Do they believe negative or dangerous things about themselves and need to change that view in order to grow into a better person? Or are they more like Zuko, believing propaganda or a worldview that is at odds with the reality of the world or similar? Or is it their moral viewpoint that needs changing, as we see with Edmund, where the cost of their actions may prove too much? It is likely that if you challenge one of these, the others will fall, but the trick is to find which one is key to truly changing them. Like dominoes, they must all fall in a specific order for them all to be altered. This can be helped along by other PCs, specific NPCs, or events within the game and experiences through the story. NPCs are particularly effective when employing the mentor figure trope. Often, a hero will have two mentors in opposition of each other, representing the internal want versus need struggle within the character. We see this through the mentor figures that crop up in our examples. Zuko has both Fire Lord Ozai and his uncle Iroh. Side note, have you ever considered how Ozai and Iroh are phonetically opposite names? Anyway, Edmund has the White Witch and Aslan, and Donna has her mother and the Doctor, and in a more consistent place, Wilf, her grandfather. These characters both stand to represent the best and the worst parts of a character and allow you to give the character broader options as to what side of themselves they wish to indulge.
Work with your players, figure out what their triangle of perspective looks like. You don't have to tell them specifically that this is what you're probing for, but what does it matter if they know? Involving your players in the journey that their character is going to go on is only going to lead to a better and more fulfilling arc for them. They know their characters better than you ever will, and one of the key things I think a lot of DMs make a mistake of thinking is that surprise is the best thing. Shocking your players, surprising them with the way the story is going. It can be great, it can lead to some fantastic moments, but suspense is also not to be discounted. Just because the players know where the story is heading, what's going to happen next, doesn't mean their characters do. And if you have a good party who are able to very clearly distinguish themselves between what is happening with their characters and what they know, then that can lead to an incredible moment where they really lean into this dramatic irony and suspense, and it all builds up to a fantastic moment. Most people playing something like Descent into Avernus will know that the end confrontation is going to involve Zariel. That's not a surprise, and it doesn't need to be a surprising thing, because then it allows your players to create this allows your players to create their own narrative on the why. The book, from what I can tell having been playing it, is shaky on justifications. It relies a lot on it's the right thing to do, and this isn't always going to work for every character, my own character included. So I've had a fantastic time of figuring out the why and working with my DM and with my fellow players on why my character is willing to put herself at extreme risk for a place she doesn't really care about. So, in summary, first step, identify what a character wants. This will often be misguided or just flat out wrong. Then they think they need to achieve their goal, but will end up being woefully unsatisfying for them. Zuko earning his father's respect Edmund joining Jadis Donna is a trickier one. I think living a normal life is a solid option, as is marrying acclaimed shipman Clarence Bennett. This is point A in the character's journey. Next step is to find point B. This is what the character actually needs. This is the thing that will allow them to grow and improve, and will present the question to them of how they grow and improve. Do they take the opportunity, seize it for all it's worth, and grow because of it? Or do they cast it aside and descend into darkness? Zuko needed to realize his true destiny was to help the Avatar restore balance. Edmund needed to stop being such an asshole and reach a point of mutual respect and understanding with his siblings. And Donna needed to understand just how special she was. With point A and B identified, we can then figure out the how of getting from point A to point B. This can be done using the triangle of perspective, and this gives a clear framework on how a change in perception and perspective is necessary for character growth. This journey will not and should not be done quickly. A character should be allowed to falter, to fail, because it will make that eventual rise that much more impactful. This capacity for failure can be better facilitated by the use of mentor figures. These can be good mentors or bad mentors. But the important part is they give a path for the character to follow. Whether they choose to follow that or not is down to them. Once the right part of their perception has been called into question, the road is then open for the PC as to whether or not they wish for their character to complete the arc that you have laid out for them, or you have worked together to lay out for them, or if their character refuses and falls. This is the important thing. As GMs, we should always be putting choices before our players. If we wanted complete control of the narrative, we would go write a book. Giving the option for failure, complete failure, is what makes the randomness of RPG so enticing. And that's still true for character arcs. Failed character arcs, the ones where a character has every opportunity to improve, to become better, and yet fails all the same, are some of the most compelling stories in fiction. Now, in an RPG, seeing this may lead to a situation where the character no longer works within the party and may have to leave and so on, come back with the person comes back with a new character. But this doesn't always have to be a bad thing. And it might be a thing to then discuss with your players at the time as to whether or not they think this new character, or this new version of the character, can coexist within the group. Well, I hope that was helpful for you all, GM and player alike. If you are a player who sat through this whole thing, thank you. And I encourage you to talk to your DMs and start spitballing ideas you have for your character's character arc. Let them know the kind of things you want to see your character tested by, how you think they could develop, if you want them to rise or fall. And if you're a DM, then work with your players. Talk with them as much as you can about their characters, where they're going, where they've been, where they might yet go. This allows you to get solid opinions on ideas. It means that when you put a choice in front of your players, it's not going to be one that doesn't work or is contrary to the character. This will create a much more open and engaging experience at the table as well. Players are going to know their characters better than you, no matter how much time you spend thinking on them. You are not those characters, the players are. If you'd like to support me in creating more of these videos, please do consider checking out my Patreon. You get early access to videos as they come out, as well as unique access to all the homebrew stuff that I am putting up there. There's currently character questionnaires, injury tables for every damage type in D&D 5e, as well as recently a prosthesis workshop on how to include prosthetics and the like within your RPG games. For now, I'd like to shout out my current patrons. That is Mike Duller, Raven Ranger, Francesca Forrest, Luke and Peyton Rose. Thank you so much for the support, and I will see you next time. What does it matter, Noya? There's a cat currently behind the camera.